analyze or learn how to interpret poems. So I don't know if you love reading poetry, but of course, poems are one of the best ways on how to enjoy literature. It's actually a very figurative way to use language and express it in a metrical or rhythmic pattern. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy reading poems or literature. Well, as a practice in language teaching, we use poems to teach vocabulary, to teach the metaphors of language, the various metaphors or the various figurative language used in writing poetry. And we also have to develop creativity among the students on how they can create mental picture out of the sceneries that are being mentioned in the poems, or these are actually the imagery. So, of course, you have idea about the elements of poetry. Of course, the rhyme, rhythm, meter, persona, and imagery. When we say imagery, these are the mental pictures that are created on your mind or to the minds of the readers once they read a particular poetry. Okay, and persona refers to the person speaking in the poem. I repeat, persona refers to the person speaking in the poem. So we have a first person persona or second person persona. So this pertains to the point of view, first person point of view or second person point of view. So the person speaking in poems is called persona. Okay, so first, when you have to read, of course, the first step is reading. You have to read it through. So most likely, the first time you read it, you don't really get what it's being said somehow. So it's normal that we don't easily grasp what's being said in the poem. So it might pertain to your pace on reading. So do not read in hurry. Definitely, don't read in a hurry. You have to take your time. Enjoy the rhythm, enjoy the rhyme, and enjoy the imagery being formed in your mind or the mental pictures formed in your mind while reading poetry. Don't rush. Read it. Read it aloud and read it once more. That's the key on how to enjoy or to analyze poems. So that's actually true. Okay, so this particular step one, is to read the poem aloud. Why? Because you will hear the rhythm and the rhyming. And of course, well, somehow reading poetry is a personal venture. You can read it on your own, but if you'd like to read it aloud, of course, allow more time for you to develop this skill. And can it be done in the classroom like this? Yes, in teaching literature, probably you can assign a particular stanza to one student and another stanza to another student, and then they just have to read it. And they could actually do groupings or group reading for poems. So that's what you can do on how to read the poetry. But if there are difficult words for the students to express or to read, you have to identify first the vocabs or the words that are difficult to read so that these students will be able to rehearse or drill these words before you assign them for reading. Next, unpack what the poem is about. So identify the theme or motif. Okay, when we say motif, this is actually the dominant idea being portrayed or being talked about in the poem. It's somehow related to the theme. So most likely, the theme in general is death, how losing a loved one and processing the grieving process or processing the grief that a persona is experiencing. So most likely the motive is a little bit dark. The motive is about, um, wandering nature while thinking about the memories of a loved one, of a lost loved one. So that is might, the difference between theme and motive. Okay, so what is being talked about? So you have to know that, the persona might be talking about something. So identify what is being talked about. Okay, next, look for pronouns and proper nouns. This is actually the key for you to identify the persona or the person is speaking in the poem. Next, follow the punctuation. Not necessarily that poems have to use punctuation because, of course, poem is not the use of ordinary language. We do not, arrange our grammar accordingly to, SVO, SVEIO, something like that. There is actually a process of defamiliarization. We could actually obscure or we could actually rearrange the rules of the grammar in writing poetry. We can do that to, to defamiliarize the audience. Sorry for that word. Yeah, the process of defamiliarization is achieved in poetry. So look for punctuations because they might entail the fluidity or flow of the thought process of the writer. So if it's like a punctuation, like a comma, so most likely the next line is associated with the first line or the succeeding line. And then if it's a period, then definitely you have to pause and process what's said. Yeah, it's very important. Punctuation somehow gives us a definite meaning or interpretation for a particular line or stanza. Next, look for recurring images or symbols. Or like I said before, these are motifs. And what are these? Moving forward, hating a person, something like that. Well, it's very bitter, but I guess yeah, it's just a natural motive. Next, step three is to pay attention to the rhythm. So every language has different pattern for rhythm, but rhythm is a way of conveying meaning. So poets utilize this by putting rhythms into your mouth. So if you are reading an English poem, so most likely there are what we call soft and unstressed syllables, or the hard syllables, or the stressed syllables. So you have to identify what are these and group them together. So that's where you get to have the rhythm. So, this is the thing that you can do. Try to discuss the meaning you find in rhythm, and attempt to discuss rhythm even if you cannot remember the terminology is going to gain you marks. So, definitely identify the rhythm. If it's a free verse, yeah, definitely, yeah, just enjoy reading it. Yeah, same process, just follow through. Next, look for enjambment. What is an enjambment? Okay, it is defined here. Each line of a poem will finish with a punctuation mark like a comma, dash, or colon, semicolon, or period. Sometimes this isn't the case and it runs on to the next line. So in the absence of punctuation marks, is called enjambment. But definitely the lines are connected to each other. So you just have to follow through with the thought process of the line, the first line to the second line to the third line. Identify the relationships of these lines together. Next, look for techniques. What are the techniques used by the writer? Well, definitely if it's a free verse or yeah, well, you just have to follow through with the thought process of the writer. Or if it's like more like a stanza type, so you have to identify the meanings behind this. Like in the first stanza has 5 lines, the second stanza has 3 lines, and the next stanza has 5 lines, 5, 3, 5. So what's the meaning of that one? So basically, we know it's not about chronology or looking about numbers, identifying the meanings behind these numbers, but it's better to at least look into that idea about the techniques used by the writer. Next, you have to identify the figurative language used in the poems. So basically, these are one: repetition, simile, metaphor, and rhyme and slant rhyme. These are literary techniques that a lot of writers employ in their works. And then here, consider the poetic form. Poetic form refers to the type of poetry. There are types of poetry like haiku, originating from Japan, the ballads, the sonnets, and many more. So basically, these carry an implicit meaning, okay, implicit meaning for particular compositions. So what you have to do is, identify what these are, and just try to discuss them. Okay, so in your critique of the poem, start with the motive. I think that's a great idea. Start first with the topic, what it is all about. What is the poem all about? Start with that one. Then try to navigate or try to give more details about the motive or the theme that has been talked about by the writer. So that's a clearer path for you to follow. So okay, start with the motive, start with the theme, discuss what it is, and give details about it. So, for example, if the poem is about nature, and then the persona says, I am walking by the seashore. Yeah, what time? The imagery would give you the time reference: in the afternoon, in the evening, or early morning, or is it like a sunrise or a sunset? So definitely the imagery will be revealed to you. So discuss about it. What is the persona doing in the sea? What is he thinking about? So those are the things that you can discuss in your critique.